You wake up to a battle axe slammed into the ground beside your head. 30 Vikings circle you, silent, waiting to see if you'll stand or stay down. By nightfall, you'll either be one of them or part of the soil beneath their boots. Welcome, weary travellers. My name is Oliver, and I'll be your guide through tonight's journey. Here at Sleepy History, we throw you directly into the most shocking stories of the past, then slowly transition into history's most boring realities. Our tales are perfectly engineered to help you easily drift into your peaceful slumber. Before we begin tonight's saga of frozen suffering and ritualistic brutality, I want to thank this wonderful community for its support. For those who wish to return for our future journeys, subscribing is the easiest way to find your way back to Sleepy History. I'd love to hear from you, so drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. It's a joy seeing who's choosing to spend their evening with our global community of history lovers. Now, please settle into your most comfortable position. Adjust your pillows, pull up that blanket, and feel the weight of the day begin to melt away. Take your deepest breath and slowly exhale. There is nothing left to do, nowhere else to be. There is only the sound of my voice. Let it be your anchor as your eyelids grow heavy, letting the modern world fade away as we return to 845 CE and the unforgiving fjords of Norway. Chapter 1. The Rude Awakening. Your Viking adventure begins at what can generously be called dawn, though without alarm clocks, smartphones, or even reliable sundials. Dawn is more of a rough suggestion than an actual time. You're jolted awake not by the gentle hum of a coffee maker or the soft glow of a sunrise alarm clock, but by someone's boot connecting with your ribs. No snooze button, no 5 more minutes. Just leather meeting bone in the most effective wake-up call known to medieval Scandinavia. The longhouse where you've spent the night makes a modern, homeless shelter look like the Ritz-Carlton. Picture sleeping on wooden planks with all the cushioning properties of concrete, covered by a wool blanket that feels like it was woven from steel wool and regret. No memory foam mattresses, no Egyptian cotton sheets, no climate control keeping the temperature at a perfect 68 degrees. Just you, the unforgiving floor, and the delightful aroma of 30 unwashed warriors who believe soap is a sign of weakness. The air inside the longhouse hits you like a physical assault. It's a fragrant symphony of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, fermented fish, and something that might charitably be called rustic bathroom facilities. Think of the worst locker room smell you've ever experienced, multiply it by 10, add the distinct notes of rotting seal fat and pickled herring, then marinate the whole thing in a closed space for several months. No air fresheners, no ventilation systems, no escape. Your wake-up call comes courtesy of Bjorn the Brutal, a man whose idea of personal hygiene involves occasionally rinsing his beard with seawater. He's standing over you with the kind of expression that suggests your comfort is not high on his list of priorities. In his world, sleeping past sunrise is basically a war crime, and he's judge, jury, and enthusiastic executioner. Up, whelp, he bellows in Old Norse, which sounds like someone gargling gravel while being attacked by angry geese. No gentle wake-up routines here. No meditation apps or morning yoga sessions. Just raw, unfiltered aggression delivered at maximum volume by a man who considers indoor voice to be a foreign concept. You stumble to your feet, every muscle in your body protesting like a union on strike. Modern humans might reach for ibuprofen, a hot shower, or at least a decent cup of coffee, you get to reach for consciousness while your bones feel like they've been used as drumsticks by an enthusiastic giant. The bed you've spent the night on has all the ergonomic support of a medieval torture device, because essentially that's what it was. The morning routine begins immediately, and it's about as gentle as a Viking raid on a monastery. No time for brushing teeth with an electric toothbrush, no quick scroll through social media, no breakfast sandwich from a drive-through. Instead, you're handed a chunk of rock-hard bread that could double as a building material and told to eat it while you prepare for the day's festivities. The bread, if you can call it that, has the texture and taste of compressed sawdust seasoned with despair. It's not the worst thing you'll eat today, which should give you some idea of what's coming. No artisanal sourdough, no avocado toast, no quinoa bowls with organic everything, just carbohydrates that require the jaw strength of a bear trap to consume. Bjorn explains the day's schedule with all the warmth of a tax audit. First, you'll be participating in weapons training, which sounds exciting until you realise that training involves getting beaten senseless with wooden swords by people who learned violence as their first language. Then comes endurance testing, followed by something he calls character building, which translates roughly to systematic humiliation for educational purposes. The weapons handed out for training make medieval torture devices look user-friendly. Your sword is a wooden practice blade that weighs approximately 30 pounds and has been lovingly crafted to inflict maximum discomfort on the wielder. No lightweight titanium alloys, no ergonomic grips, no safety features of any kind, just wood, weight, and the promise of immediate regret. Your first opponent is a 13-year-old Viking boy who's been swinging these medieval clubs since he could walk. He approaches the combat with the casual confidence of someone who knows he's about to demonstrate the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical application. His wooden sword moves like it's an extension of his arm, while yours feels like you're trying to fight with a telephone pole. The training begins with what can only be described as educational violence. The boy doesn't just defeat you, he provides a comprehensive tutorial on all the ways a human body can be painfully repositioned using nothing but leverage and enthusiasm. No protective gear, no safety protocols, no timeouts for injury assessment. Just raw, unfiltered combat education delivered with the efficiency of a medieval Amazon Prime. Within minutes, you're discovering muscles you didn't know existed, mostly through the medium of intense pain. Every swing of your weapon feels like trying to operate heavy machinery after drinking a gallon of energy drinks and spinning around 20 times. The wooden sword becomes less of a weapon and more of a device for inflicting self-harm with style. Chapter 2. The Art of Medieval Pain Management. The morning's combat education leaves you with what the Vikings would call learning marks and what modern emergency rooms would call multiple contusions requiring immediate medical attention. Your body has become a roadmap of medieval training techniques, each bruise telling the story of a lesson violently learned. Pain management in 9th century Norway consists primarily of walking it off, drinking something alcoholic, or having someone hit you somewhere else to distract from the original injury. No ice packs, no heating pads, no anti-inflammatory medications that actually work. Just the ancient art of pretending everything is fine, while your nervous system files formal complaints. The Vikings have developed a sophisticated understanding of pain that can be summarized as embrace it or die trying. Their medical philosophy revolves around the belief that suffering builds character, and if you're not actively suffering, you're probably not learning anything valuable. It's like modern CrossFit, but with more axes and fewer safety waivers. Your training partner, young Olaf the Optimistic, explains Viking pain theory, while casually demonstrating pressure points on your already tender anatomy. According to him, pain is just weakness leaving the body, and judging by how much weakness is currently evacuating your system, you should be approaching superhuman strength any moment now. The day's second activity involves something called endurance building, which turns out to be a euphemism for seeing how long you can carry heavy things while people yell at you. You're handed a shield that weighs roughly the same as a modern refrigerator and told to hold it above your head while marching around the village. No gym memberships, no personal trainers with encouraging smiles, no motivational posters featuring cats hanging from branches. Just raw physical torment administered with Viking efficiency. The shield itself is a masterpiece of medieval engineering designed to inflict maximum suffering on its user. It's made from oak planks bound with iron, decorated with intricate Norse designs and weighted with what feels like the concentrated essence of gravity itself. Carrying it feels like trying to do yoga while balancing a washing machine on your head. As you stumble around the village with your overhead shield, local Vikings offer helpful commentary on your technique. Their suggestions range from stop being weak to try not dying, delivered with the encouraging tone typically reserved for terminal diagnoses. No participation trophies, no good effort recognition, no acknowledgement that you're attempting something physically impossible. The village itself provides a scenic backdrop for your suffering. Picture a collection of wooden buildings that look like they were designed by someone who'd heard about architecture secondhand, but never actually seen a building. The longhouses lean at angles that would make modern building inspectors faint, held together by hope, mud, and the occasional iron nail when someone feels particularly extravagant. The streets, if they can be called that, are basically mud trails decorated with whatever couldn't be bothered to make it to the designated waste areas. No paved roads, no sidewalks, no storm drains to manage the constant precipitation that defines Norwegian weather. Just organic pathways that combine soil, animal waste, and whatever fell out of people's pockets into a fragrant walkway experience. Your shield-carrying marathon takes you past the village's various commercial enterprises, each one a testament to humanity's ability to create economy out of basic survival needs. The blacksmith works over a forge that fills the air with sparks, smoke, and the kind of heat that makes modern air conditioning seem like divine intervention. No safety equipment, no ventilation systems, no OSHA regulations to prevent workplace accidents. The smell emanating from the blacksmith's forge is a complex bouquet of burning charcoal, heated metal, and human perspiration, seasoned with what might charitably be called rustic working conditions. It's the kind of aroma that makes you grateful for modern industrial regulations and workplace safety standards. Chapter 3: The Feast of Questionable Decisions. After what feels like 17 hours, but was probably only 3, the day's formal torture session concludes with an invitation to the evening meal. This sounds promising until you realise that Viking cuisine operates under a completely different definition of food than anything you might recognise from modern civilization. The communal dining experience takes place in the same longhouse where you spent the previous night, except now it's filled with the additional aromas of cooking meat, fermented beverages, and the collective enthusiasm of warriors who've spent the day inflicting educational violence on each other. No separate dining rooms, no table service, no menu options that don't involve something that was recently alive and fighting back. The seating arrangement follows a strict hierarchy based on your ability to inflict harm on others, which places you somewhere between the village goats and the decorative shields in terms of social standing. You're assigned a spot on a wooden bench that has all the comfort features of sitting on a log because essentially that's what it is. No cushioned chairs, no back support, no ergonomic design considerations of any kind. The evening's entertainment begins with someone producing a musical instrument that sounds like a dying animal set to rhythm. It's actually a form of traditional Norse music, but the distinction between music and torture becomes somewhat academic when you're experiencing it at close range. No Spotify playlists, no noise-cancelling headphones, no volume controls. Just raw acoustic assault delivered with Viking enthusiasm. The meal itself arrives in waves of increasingly questionable dietary choices. First comes something called blood pudding, which is exactly what it sounds like and tastes significantly worse. It's the kind of culinary creation that makes you grateful for modern food safety regulations and the existence of vegetarian alternatives. The main course features roasted meat of uncertain origin, seasoned with herbs that grow naturally in the harsh Norwegian climate and taste like they're actively trying to discourage consumption. The cooking method appears to involve applying fire until the outside is charred black, while the inside remains concerningly pink. No meat thermometers, no food safety guidelines, no guarantee that what you are eating won't fight back. Accompanying the meat is a form of bread that doubles as construction material when not being consumed. It has the texture of compressed gravel and the flavour of disappointment, baked over an open fire by someone whose understanding of cooking comes entirely from trial and error, with heavy emphasis on the error portion. The beverages deserve special mention for their ability to combine alcohol with what can only be described as aggressive flavour profiles. The ale tastes like someone fermented tree bark in dirty water, then added honey to mask the flavour, which only succeeds in creating something that tastes like sweet tree bark in dirty water. No craft breweries, no quality control, no ingredients you could pronounce even if you wanted to. As the evening progresses and the alcohol takes effect, the Vikings become increasingly animated in their storytelling. These tales typically involve detailed descriptions of previous raids, elaborate accounts of personal combat experiences, and lengthy explanations of various ways to inflict harm on enemies. It's like listening to action movie plots, except these people actually lived through them and have the scars to prove it. The storytelling tradition serves multiple purposes in Viking society. It preserves historical knowledge, entertains the community, and provides educational content for young warriors who need to understand the practical applications of violence. No Netflix, no YouTube, no streaming services of any kind, just oral tradition delivered with the enthusiasm of people who understand that entertainment and education often involve the same stories. Your role in these festivities is primarily to listen, learn, and try not to vomit from the combination of questionable food and rotating seating arrangements on wooden benches. The Vikings have thoughtfully included you in their cultural traditions, which mostly involves being the target of jokes about your obvious incompetence in all areas of practical life. Chapter 4. The Ritual of Becoming. The following morning arrives with the same subtlety as the previous day, which is to say, none whatsoever. The initiation ritual that will supposedly transform you from useless outsider to barely acceptable Viking begins before dawn with a ceremony that combines religious significance with systematic humiliation. The ritual preparation takes place at the edge of the village, where the longhouses give way to the wild Norwegian landscape. Here, surrounded by pine forests and the constant sound of wind through the trees, you begin to understand that Viking spirituality is as harsh and unforgiving as everything else in their culture. The ceremony leader is an elderly woman named Astrid the Wise, whose understanding of wisdom appears to involve knowing exactly how much suffering a human being can endure before permanent damage occurs. She approaches the initiation with the methodical efficiency of someone who has guided countless young people through this transformation and has refined the process to maximize educational value. The first stage involves purification, which in Viking terms means standing naked in a freezing stream, while Astrid chants in Old Norse and throws various herbs into the water around you. The herbs are supposed to cleanse your spirit and prepare you for the trials ahead. Mostly they just make the water smell like a combination of pine needles and regret while you try not to die of hypothermia. The stream itself is fed by snow melt from the mountains, which means the water temperature hovers somewhere between uncomfortably cold and medically dangerous. You discover muscles you never knew existed as your body attempts to generate enough heat to maintain basic biological functions. The Vikings watching the ceremony offer helpful encouragement, which mostly consists of laughter and suggestions that you should try not to embarrass your ancestors. After what feels like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, you're allowed to emerge from the stream and begin the next phase of the ritual. This involves consuming a special drink prepared by Astrid from ingredients that she describes as traditional and character building, which should immediately raise several red flags about what you're about to put in your body. The ceremonial beverage has the colour of pond water and the consistency of something that might have been milk several weeks ago, but has since embarked on an independent journey toward becoming cheese. The taste defies description, combining elements of sour, bitter, and what can only be called aggressively herbal into a flavour profile that makes you question the wisdom of having a functioning sense of taste. Chapter 5. The Weight of Belonging. The ceremonial drink begins to take effect as you stand dripping by the stream, and you realise that Astrid's special preparation contains ingredients that alter consciousness in ways that modern recreational substances would consider excessive. The world takes on a dreamlike quality where colours become more vivid and sounds echo with strange resonance through the morning air. The Vikings explain that this altered state is necessary for the spiritual aspects of the initiation, allowing you to commune with the ancestors and receive their guidance for the challenges ahead. In practical terms, it means you're about to undergo physical trials while operating under the influence of medieval psychoactive herbs, which seems like the kind of combination that would violate numerous modern safety regulations. The trials begin with tests of physical endurance designed to demonstrate your worthiness to join the warrior community. These challenges have been developed over generations of Viking tradition, refined to identify the qualities necessary for survival in their harsh world. Each test builds upon the previous one, creating a comprehensive evaluation of your ability to function under extreme stress. The first challenge involves carrying a heavy stone up a steep hillside while maintaining perfect balance on a narrow path. The stone weighs approximately 50 pounds and has been carved with runic symbols that supposedly provide spiritual protection during the trial. The path winds through dense forest, offering numerous opportunities to stumble, fall, or otherwise demonstrate your lack of coordination in spectacular fashion. As you begin the climb, the effects of Astrid's ceremonial beverage make every step an adventure in spatial reasoning. The ground seems to shift beneath your feet, and the weight of the stone feels like it's constantly changing, sometimes light as a feather, and sometimes heavy as a boulder. The Vikings following behind offer periodic encouragement, which mostly consists of pointing out various ways you could improve your technique. The hillside itself presents a series of natural obstacles that test different aspects of physical ability. Loose rocks challenge your balance, fallen logs require careful navigation, and steep sections demand the kind of leg strength that comes only from a lifetime of climbing mountains while carrying heavy objects. The path has been used for these initiation ceremonies for generations, worn smooth by the feet of countless young Vikings who have attempted this same journey. The forest around you lives and breathes with the sounds of Norwegian wildlife, creatures that have adapted to the harsh climate and rocky terrain. Birds call from the treetops with songs that seem to echo differently in your altered state of consciousness, and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush takes on an almost musical quality. The natural world becomes part of the ceremony, witnessing your efforts to prove yourself worthy of joining the warrior community. As you climb higher, the village below becomes visible through breaks in the forest canopy. The collection of wooden buildings looks impossibly small from this perspective, a fragile human settlement carved out of the vast wilderness that stretches in all directions. The sight reminds you of the constant struggle required to maintain civilization in this unforgiving landscape, where survival depends on the strength and cooperation of every community member. The stone grows heavier with each step, not because its weight actually changes, but because your muscles begin to fatigue under the constant strain. Your shoulders ache from supporting the load, your legs burn from the steady climb, and your lungs work harder to extract oxygen from the thin mountain air. Every breath becomes a conscious effort, every step a deliberate choice to continue despite the growing discomfort. The ceremonial drink continues to affect your perception, making the ordinary challenges of the climb feel like epic struggles against cosmic forces. Each obstacle becomes a test, not just of physical ability, but of spiritual determination. The Vikings believe that the ancestors watch over these initiation ceremonies, guiding worthy candidates through the trials and revealing the character flaws of those who lack the strength to continue. Chapter 6. The endless rhythm of daily preparation. The morning light filtered through the forest canopy as you completed the stone-carrying trial, casting long shadows that dance between the towering pine trees. The Vikings who had followed your progress up the hillside nodded with what might have been approval, though their expressions remained as stoic as carved stone. The completion of one trial meant only that you were ready to begin the next phase of the initiation process, a series of challenges that would continue throughout the long summer day. The descent from the hillside required the same careful attention to balance and footing as the climb. But now your muscles trembled with fatigue, and the ceremonial drink continued to alter your perception of distance and depth. Each step down the narrow forest path demanded conscious effort to place your feet correctly on the uneven ground, where roots and loose stones created countless opportunities for spectacular failure. The stone that had seemed so heavy during the climb now felt like an extension of your aching shoulders, its weight distributed through your tired frame in ways that made every movement a reminder of the trial you had just completed. The Vikings moved through the forest with the easy confidence of people who had spent their entire lives navigating this terrain. Their feet found secure footing automatically, their bodies adjusted to the slope and obstacles without conscious thought, and they carried their own ceremonial stones as if they weighed nothing at all. This was their world, shaped by generations of ancestors who had learned to extract survival from the harsh Norwegian landscape through skill, endurance, and an acceptance of constant physical challenge. As the group returned to the village, the sounds of daily life gradually replaced the quiet whispers of the forest. Smoke rose from cooking fires, the rhythmic hammering of the blacksmith's work echoed off the surrounding hills, and voices called back and forth as people went about their morning tasks. The longhouses stood solid and functional against the backdrop of wilderness, their timber walls dark with age and weathering, their thatched roofs crowned with wisps of smoke from the fires that burned continuously within. The next phase of the initiation required you to demonstrate proficiency in the practical skills that every Viking warrior needed to master. These were not the dramatic combat techniques that stories and legends celebrated, but the mundane, repetitive tasks that actually kept people alive in this unforgiving environment. The ability to maintain weapons and equipment, to prepare food under difficult conditions, to create and repair the clothing and tools necessary for survival through the long, dark winters. Beyond the brutal led you to a work area behind one of the longhouses, where various tools and materials had been arranged for the practical testing. The space was sheltered from the wind by wooden walls, but open to the sky above, providing natural light for detailed work while protecting against the sudden weather changes that characterized the Norwegian climate. Here, surrounded by the tools of daily survival, you would spend the remainder of the morning demonstrating your ability to contribute to the community's welfare. The first task involved the maintenance of weapons, specifically the care and sharpening of iron blades that formed the foundation of Viking military effectiveness. You were presented with a collection of knives, axes, and sword blades in various states of dullness and corrosion, along with the whetstones, oils, and cloths needed to restore them to functional condition. The work required patience, technique, and an understanding of metallurgy that had been passed down through generations of Norse craftsmen. The whetstone felt rough and gritty beneath your fingers as you began the slow process of restoring an edge to a badly dulled knife blade. The motion was simple in concept but required precise execution, a steady angle, consistent pressure, and the patience to repeat the same movements hundreds of times until the metal gradually resumed its proper sharpness. The sound of steel against stone created a rhythmic scraping that blended with similar sounds from other work areas around the village, a constant background noise that spoke of the endless maintenance required to keep civilization functioning. The Vikings watched your technique with critical attention, occasionally offering corrections to your hand position or suggestions for maintaining the proper angle, Their own hands moved over their weapons with the unconscious skill of long practice, fingers automatically finding the correct grip, wrists maintaining the perfect angle without conscious thought. These were tools that could mean the difference between life and death in combat, and their maintenance could not be left to chance or inexperience. As you worked, the repetitive motion of sharpening became almost meditative, the steady rhythm of steel against stone creating a kind of trance state that was enhanced by the lingering effects of the ceremonial drink. The blade gradually resumed its proper keenness, the dull grey metal giving way to bright steel that reflected the morning light. Each stroke of the whetstone removed a microscopic layer of metal, slowly revealing the sharp edge beneath, and the process became a metaphor for the gradual transformation that the initiation ceremony was designed to accomplish. The morning air carried the scents of wood smoke and cooking food from the various households scattered throughout the village. Somewhere nearby, someone was preparing the day's bread, and the smell of baking grain mixed with the smoke to create an aroma that spoke of domestic comfort and security. Other scents drifted on the breeze, the tang of iron from the blacksmith's forge, the earthy smell of turned soil from garden plots, the clean scent of pine resin from the surrounding forest. The work continued through the morning hours, each completed blade adding to your growing understanding of the meticulous care required to maintain the tools of survival. The whetstones gradually wore smooth under constant use. The rhythm of sharpening became automatic, and your hands developed the calluses and small cuts that marked a person who worked regularly with edged tools. This was the unglamorous reality behind the dramatic stories of Viking raids and battles. Endless hours of careful maintenance, patient preparation, and repetitive practice that made heroic moments possible. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the work area gradually warmed from the combination of direct sunlight and shelter from the wind. The physical effort of maintaining consistent pressure and angle while sharpening began to tell on muscles that were already tired from the morning's stone-carrying trial. Your shoulders ached from hunching over the work, your back complained about the bent posture required for precise blade work, and your hands grew stiff from gripping tools and whetstones for extended periods. The Vikings demonstrated the proper technique for testing blade sharpness, using methods that had been developed through generations of experience with edged weapons. A properly sharpened blade should slice through a piece of rope with minimal pressure, should pare thin shavings from a stick of wood without catching or tearing, should reflect light evenly along its entire edge without the dark spots that indicated dull areas. These tests were not merely academic exercises, but practical evaluations that could determine whether a weapon would function properly when life depended on its effectiveness. The social dynamics of the work group gradually became apparent as the morning progressed. Bjorn the Brutal maintained his role as primary instructor, but other Vikings contributed their expertise when specific techniques required demonstration. Young Olaf proved particularly skilled at the fine work of polishing and finishing, while an older warrior named Eric the Steady showed superior technique for working with badly damaged blades. The knowledge was shared freely within the group, passed from experienced hands to learning ones through demonstration and patient repetition. The rhythm of work created its own kind of community, a shared focus on practical tasks that built bonds through cooperation and mutual assistance. When someone struggled with a particularly difficult blade or challenging technique, Others stepped in to offer guidance and support. The harsh competitiveness of the combat training gave way to collaborative problem-solving, as everyone understood that the community's survival depended on each member's ability to maintain the tools and equipment that made life possible in this demanding environment. Total word count delivered. So far, 5,000 target word count, 15,000 remaining words needed, 10,000 chunks remaining, 4 targets for this chunk, 2,500. The afternoon brought new challenges as the weapon maintenance phase transitioned into more complex tasks that required both technical skill and cultural understanding. The Vikings led you to a different work area where various materials had been arranged for the creation and repair of the clothing and equipment that formed the foundation of daily survival. Here, in the practical realm of domestic crafts, you would learn the unglamorous skills that actually kept people alive through the harsh Norwegian seasons. The first task involved the preparation of leather for various uses, from boot repairs to the creation of protective garments that could withstand the rigours of outdoor work and combat. The raw hides had been soaking in large wooden vats filled with a mixture of water, tree bark, and other organic materials that gradually transformed animal skin into usable leather. The process required constant attention, regular stirring, and periodic testing to determine when the chemical transformation had proceeded far enough to produce material with the desired properties. The smell emanating from the leather preparation vats was distinctive and powerful, a combination of wet animal hide, decomposing organic matter, and the earthy scents of bark and plant materials. It was not an unpleasant odour exactly, but rather a complex aroma that spoke of transformation and the ancient human relationship with the natural world. The Vikings seemed completely unaffected by the smell, their noses long accustomed to the scents of traditional crafts and agricultural processes. Your task was to retrieve pieces of leather from the soaking vats and test them for readiness by stretching, folding, and examining the texture and flexibility. Properly prepared leather should bend without cracking, stretch without tearing, and maintain its shape when released from tension. Under-processed leather would be stiff and brittle, while over-processed material would be weak and prone to deterioration. The assessment required experience and judgment that could only be developed through years of working with these materials. The work was repetitive and methodical, requiring careful attention to subtle differences in texture and appearance that indicated various stages of the preparation process. Each piece of leather had to be examined individually, tested through a series of standard procedures, and either returned to the vat for additional processing or moved to the next stage of preparation. The Vikings demonstrated the proper techniques with patient repetition, their hands moving through the testing procedures with automatic precision. As you worked with the leather, other members of the community continued their own daily tasks around the village. Women tended cooking fires and prepared meals. Children carried water and gathered firewood. Older men worked on various repair and maintenance projects that kept the settlement functioning. The sound of daily life created a constant background noise. Conversations in Old Norse, the laughter of children at play, the rhythmic sounds of various crafts and trades being practiced throughout the community. The leather work continued through the early afternoon, each completed piece adding to your understanding of the time and effort required to produce the basic materials of daily life. Modern manufacturing processes had made such skills obsolete, but in Viking society, The ability to transform raw materials into usable goods was essential for survival. Every piece of clothing, every tool, every item of equipment had to be created and maintained through human labour and traditional techniques. The testing process gradually revealed the subtle indicators that distinguished good leather from poor, properly processed material, from inadequate preparation. The texture should be smooth but not slippery, flexible but not weak, uniform in thickness, without thin spots or holes. The colour should be consistent throughout each piece, without the mottled appearance that indicated uneven processing or contaminated preparation solutions. These quality indicators had been developed through generations of experience, passed down from master craftsmen to apprentices, through careful observation and patient practice. Chapter 7. The Burden of Domestic Necessity. The afternoon's work transitioned from leather preparation to the even more fundamental task of food preservation, the techniques that allowed communities to survive through the long months when fresh provisions were scarce or completely unavailable. The Vikings led you to a work area where various methods of preserving meat, fish and vegetables were demonstrated with the methodical thoroughness that characterized all aspects of their practical education. The preservation of food required understanding seasonal patterns, weather conditions, and the chemical processes that prevented spoilage under different circumstances. Meat could be smoked over carefully maintained fires, salted with precious mineral deposits, or dried in the wind and sun under conditions that had to be monitored constantly to prevent contamination. Fish required different techniques depending on the species and size, while vegetables and grains each had their own requirements for long-term storage. The smoking process began with the selection of appropriate wood, different species providing distinct flavours and preservation qualities that had been catalogued through generations of experience. Oak provided steady, consistent heat with a mild flavour that worked well with most types of meat. Pine and other resinous woods were avoided because their smoke could impart bitter tastes and potentially harmful chemicals. The selection process required knowledge of local trees, their burning characteristics, and seasonal variations in wood quality. The construction of smoking structures was an art that combined engineering principles with practical experience. The smoke had to circulate properly around the meat without becoming so hot that it cooked rather than preserved the flesh. Ventilation had to be carefully controlled to maintain the right balance of heat, moisture, and air circulation. Temperature variations could ruin entire batches of preserved food, representing the loss of resources that might mean the difference between survival and starvation during difficult seasons. Your role in the smoking process involved the constant monitoring of fires and the regular turning of meat to ensure even exposure to the preserving smoke. The work required attention to detail and the ability to recognize subtle changes in color, texture, and aroma that indicated proper progress through the preservation stages. Too little smoking would leave the meat vulnerable to spoilage, while too much would create a product that was unpalatable or even inedible. The Vikings demonstrated the traditional methods for testing the progress of smoked meat, techniques that relied on visual examination, texture assessment, and careful evaluation of aroma. Properly smoked meat should develop a dark uniform surface colour, without black spots that indicated overheating or contamination. The texture should become firm but not brittle, and the characteristic smoky smell should penetrate throughout the flesh without overwhelming the natural meat flavours. As the smoking process continued, other preservation methods were demonstrated in parallel work areas around the village. Salt preservation required careful attention to the quality and purity of the mineral, as contaminated salt could introduce harmful bacteria that would spoil the entire batch of preserved food. The meat had to be completely covered with salt and stored in containers that protected it from moisture, while allowing excess liquid to drain away. The drying process depended entirely on weather conditions, requiring constant monitoring of humidity, temperature, and air circulation. Meat had to be cut into strips of uniform thickness, hung in locations that received adequate airflow without exposure to rain or excessive moisture. The drying process could take weeks under optimal conditions, and any change in weather patterns could ruin the entire batch if proper adjustments were not made immediately. The preservation work continued through the afternoon hours, each completed batch representing food security for the community during the months when hunting and fishing would be difficult or impossible. The Vikings approached these tasks with the same serious attention they devoted to combat training and weapons maintenance, understanding that survival depended as much on adequate food supplies as on military prowess. The rhythm of preservation work created its own pattern of daily life, with different tasks requiring attention at various times throughout the day and night. Smoking fires needed to be maintained constantly, drying meat had to be protected from sudden weather changes, and salt-preserved foods required regular inspection to ensure that the preservation process was proceeding properly. These responsibilities were distributed among community members according to experience and availability, creating a complex schedule of shared duties. The social aspects of preservation work became apparent as the afternoon progressed. Knowledge was shared freely among participants, with experienced practitioners offering guidance and correction to those learning the techniques. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities rather than failures, and the community approach to these essential tasks created bonds of cooperation and mutual dependence that strengthened the social fabric of the settlement. Chapter 8. The Weight of Winter. Preparation. As evening approached, the preservation work expanded to include the processing of vegetables and grains that would provide essential nutrition during the months when fresh food was unavailable. The Vikings demonstrated techniques for drying vegetables that preserved their nutritional value while creating products that could be stored safely for extended periods without spoilage or contamination. The vegetable drying process required the same attention to detail and understanding of environmental conditions that characterized meat preservation. Different vegetables required different preparation methods, cutting techniques, and drying conditions to achieve optimal results. Root vegetables had to be sliced uniformly to ensure even drying, while leafy plants required different handling to preserve their nutritional content and prevent excessive brittleness. The construction of drying racks involved the careful arrangement of wooden frames that allowed air circulation around individual pieces while protecting them from rain, insects, and other contamination sources. The racks had to be positioned to take advantage of prevailing winds and sun exposure while remaining accessible for regular monitoring and adjustment. The design of these structures represented generations of refinement and adaptation to local climate conditions. Your task involved the careful arrangement of prepared vegetables on the drying racks, ensuring that individual pieces did not touch each other and that air could circulate freely around all surfaces. The work required patience and attention to detail, as improper arrangement could result in uneven drying that left some areas vulnerable to spoilage, while over-drying others to the point of nutritional degradation. The Vikings demonstrated the traditional methods for testing vegetable drying progress, techniques that involved visual examination, texture testing, and careful evaluation of moisture content. Properly dried vegetables should maintain their shape and colour while becoming flexible rather than brittle. The texture should be leathery without being tough, and the moisture content should be low enough to prevent bacterial growth during storage. As the vegetable preparation continued, the grain processing work began in another area of the village. The preservation of grains required different techniques focused on moisture control, pest prevention, and protection from environmental contamination. Grains had to be thoroughly dried before storage, cleaned of debris and damaged kernels, and stored in containers that provided protection while allowing air circulation. The grain cleaning process involved the careful separation of good kernels from damaged or contaminated ones, a task that required visual acuity and understanding of the subtle indicators that distinguished healthy grain from potentially harmful material. Mouldy or insect-damaged grains could contaminate entire storage batches, making the initial cleaning process crucial for long-term food security. The construction of grain storage containers represented a sophisticated understanding of the environmental factors that affected food preservation. The containers had to protect against moisture while allowing enough air circulation to prevent condensation. They needed to exclude insects and rodents while remaining accessible for regular inspection and use. The materials and construction techniques have been refined through generations of experience with local climate conditions and storage requirements. Your role in the grain processing involved the methodical examination of individual kernels, sorting them according to quality and condition, while learning to recognize the visual indicators that distinguished good grain from potentially problematic material. The work was repetitive and required sustained attention to detail, as a single oversight could compromise the safety and quality of stored food supplies. The rhythm of grain processing created its own meditative quality, the steady sorting and cleaning becoming automatic as your hands learn to recognize quality indicators through touch and visual examination. The Vikings worked alongside you with practiced efficiency, their movements economical and precise as they processed much larger quantities of grain with a speed that came from years of experience. Chapter 9. The endless cycle of maintenance. The evening brought a shift in focus from food preservation to the maintenance and repair of the tools and equipment that made all other work possible. The Vikings led you to a workshop area where various implements in need of attention had been collected for systematic repair and restoration. Here, in the practical realm of tool maintenance, you would learn the skills that kept the community's productive capacity functioning through constant use and seasonal challenges. The workshop contained tools and equipment in various states of repair, from simple maintenance needs to complex reconstruction projects that required substantial time and skill to complete. Wooden handles needed replacement or reinforcement, Metal components required reshaping or sharpening, and composite tools needed complete disassembly and reconstruction with new materials. The repair process began with careful assessment of each tool's condition, identifying the specific problems that needed to be addressed and determining the materials and techniques required for proper restoration. Some issues were simple matters of wear that could be corrected with basic maintenance procedures, while others represented fundamental structural problems that required complete reconstruction. Your first task involved the replacement of wooden handles that had cracked or broken under the stress of regular use. The process required the selection of appropriate wood species, careful shaping to fit the specific tool requirements, and proper attachment techniques that would withstand the forces generated during normal use. Each type of tool had its own requirements for handle design, wood selection, and attachment methods. The handle shaping process involved the use of traditional woodworking tools that required skill and patience to operate effectively. Draw knives removed material in controlled amounts, allowing gradual shaping of the handle to proper dimensions. Rasps and files refined the surface texture and final dimensions, while chisels created the specific shapes and joints needed for proper tool assembly. The Vikings demonstrated the traditional techniques for evaluating wood quality, showing how to identify the grain patterns, density characteristics, and structural properties that determined suitability for different applications. Hardwoods were preferred for handles that would experience heavy shock loads, while softer woods were adequate for tools that required flexibility and lightweight. As the handle replacement work continued, other repair projects proceeded in parallel throughout the workshop. Metal components were heated in small forges and reshaped with hammer and anvil, their surfaces cleaned and treated to prevent corrosion during storage and use. The metalworking required understanding of heating temperatures, working characteristics, and the proper techniques for joining different types of metal components. The forge work created its own rhythm and atmosphere, the steady hammering of metal against anvil providing a background percussion that punctuated the quieter sounds of woodworking and assembly. Sparks flew from the heated metal as it was shaped, creating brief moments of light that illuminated the serious faces of craftsmen focused on their detailed work. The evening air gradually cooled as the sun descended toward the horizon, but the workshop remained warm from the heat of forges and the concentrated effort of multiple people working in close proximity. The combination of physical exertion and warm air created a comfortable environment that encouraged sustained work on complex projects that required attention to detail and careful execution. The social dynamics of workshop collaboration became apparent as various repair projects required cooperation between craftsmen with different specialties. A tool that needed both new wooden components and metalwork repair would pass between specialists, each contributing their particular skills to the restoration process. Knowledge was shared freely, with experienced craftsmen offering guidance and instruction to those learning new techniques. Chapter 10: The Ritual of Evening Reflection. As the repair work continued into the evening hours, the workshop gradually transitioned from intensive labour to more contemplative activities that allowed reflection on the day's accomplishments and preparation for the challenges ahead. The Vikings began to share stories and observations about the various projects completed during the day, creating an informal review process that reinforced learning and identified areas for improvement. The evening's storytelling tradition served multiple purposes beyond simple entertainment. Stories preserved knowledge about traditional techniques, passed down wisdom from previous generations, and created social bonds through shared cultural experiences. The narratives often contain practical information disguised as entertainment, teaching methods and principles through memorable tales that could be recalled when similar situations arose. Your role in the evening activities involved careful listening and occasional participation in discussions about the day's work experiences. The Vikings encouraged questions about techniques and processes, treating inquiry as a sign of serious interest in learning rather than admission of ignorance. The learning environment was supportive but demanding, expecting sustained effort and attention to detail while providing guidance and encouragement. The stories shared during the evening often involved accounts of previous winters, describing the challenges and successes that had characterized different seasons and the lessons learned through experience with varying conditions. These narratives provided practical information about seasonal patterns, resource management, and community cooperation that would be essential for surviving difficult periods. The workshop gradually quieted as the most demanding repair projects were completed and tools were organised for storage overnight. The Vikings demonstrated the proper methods for protecting tools and equipment from moisture and corrosion, showing how to apply protective oils and arrange storage to prevent damage during periods of non-use. The evening meal preparation began as cooking fires were rekindled and ingredients assembled for the community dinner. The meal would feature foods preserved using the techniques demonstrated during the afternoon, providing practical demonstration of the preservation methods and their effectiveness in creating palatable and nutritious meals from stored ingredients. The cooking process involved the careful combination of preserved meats, dried vegetables, and stored grains into dishes that provided balanced nutrition while making efficient use of available resources. The Vikings demonstrated traditional recipes that had been developed to maximize nutritional value while creating satisfying meals from preserved ingredients. As the evening progressed, the community gradually gathered for the shared meal, creating a social event that reinforced community bonds while providing opportunity for informal discussion of daily events and future plans. The meal was served in the main longhouse, where everyone could participate in conversations about work accomplishments, seasonal preparations, and community concerns. The food served during the evening meal represented the culmination of the day's preservation work, demonstrating how traditional techniques could transform raw materials into stable, nutritious provisions that maintained their quality over extended storage periods. The flavours were different from fresh ingredients, but satisfying in their own way, providing the dense nutrition needed for demanding physical work. The conversation during the meal covered various topics related to community life and seasonal preparation. Discussions included evaluation of current food stores, planning for upcoming work projects, and coordination of responsibilities for essential tasks that required community cooperation. The informal nature of the meal encouraged participation from all community members, creating democratic discussion of important issues. Chapter 11. The Deep Rest of Exhaustion. The evening meal gradually concluded as individual community members began to prepare for the night's rest, organising sleeping areas and completing final tasks that needed attention before morning. The longhouse slowly transitioned from a place of active social interaction to a quiet environment suited for sleep and restoration after the demanding activities of the day. The sleeping arrangements in the longhouse followed traditional patterns that had been developed to maximise warmth and comfort while accommodating the entire community within a shared space. Individual sleeping areas were defined by the arrangement of personal possessions and bedding materials, creating private spaces within the communal environment. Your sleeping area had been prepared with the basic materials that provided insulation from the cold ground and protection from drafts that penetrated the longhouse walls. Layers of straw, wool blankets and animal skins created a sleeping surface that was adequate for rest while remaining simple enough to be easily maintained and adjusted as needed. The process of preparing for sleep involved a careful arrangement of clothing and equipment to ensure protection from overnight temperature drops while maintaining quick access to essential items in case of emergency. Weapons were positioned within easy reach, clothing was arranged for quick dressing, and personal items were secured to prevent loss or damage during the night. The longhouse gradually quieted as conversations concluded and individual community members settled into their sleeping areas. The sounds of daily activity gave way to the subtler nighttime noises, the crackling of banked fires, the settling of wooden structures as they cooled, and the occasional movement of people adjusting their sleeping positions. The transition to sleep was gradual, allowing time for reflection on the day's experiences and mental preparation for the challenges that would arise with the next morning's activities. The physical exhaustion from demanding work created a natural inclination toward rest, while the community environment provided security and comfort that encouraged deep, restorative sleep. The darkness within the longhouse was not complete, as banked fires provided minimal light while maintaining warmth throughout the night. The gentle glow from coals created an atmosphere that was peaceful and reassuring, providing enough illumination to navigate the space while allowing the visual rest that promoted sleep. The night sounds outside the longhouse included the natural noises of the surrounding forest, wind through pine trees, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, and the subtle movements of wild creatures going about their nighttime activities. These sounds created a background environment that was both comforting in its familiarity and exciting in its reminder of the wild world beyond the human settlement. The sleeping arrangement encouraged a gradual descent into rest, as the combination of physical exhaustion, comfortable warmth, and community security created optimal conditions for deep sleep. The traditional bedding materials provided adequate insulation and cushioning, while remaining breathable enough to prevent overheating during the night. As sleep approached, the events of the day blended together in a series of memories that would be processed and integrated during the night's rest. The physical skills learned through practice would be reinforced through repetition in dreams, while the social interactions and cultural lessons would become part of the growing understanding of Viking community life. The rhythm of community sleep created its own peaceful atmosphere, as the sounds of breathing and occasional movement blended into a quiet symphony that spoke of security and shared rest. The knowledge that others were nearby provided comfort, and protection, allowing complete relaxation and the deep sleep that was essential for recovery and preparation for the demanding work that would resume with the next day's dawn. Chapter 12. The Gradual Awakening of Dawn. The morning arrived slowly, announced not by the harsh interruption of the previous day, but by the gradual lightening of the longhouse interior as dawn filtered through the small openings in the walls and roof. The transition from sleep to wakefulness followed the natural rhythm of the community, as people stirred at different times according to their individual sleep cycles and the demands of their particular responsibilities. The first sounds of morning activity began before full daylight, as those responsible for maintaining fires rose quietly to tend the coals that had burned low during the night. The process of rekindling flames required careful attention to the condition of remaining embers, the addition of appropriate fuel, and the gradual building of fires that would provide warmth and cooking capability for the day ahead. Your awakening came gradually, consciousness returning slowly as the sounds and movements of early morning activity penetrated the comfortable haze of deep sleep. The sleeping area remained warm despite the cool morning air, as the combination of bedding materials and nearby bodies had maintained comfortable temperatures throughout the night. The morning light revealed the familiar interior of the longhouse, now quiet and peaceful in the early hours before the day's work began in earnest. Personal possessions remained where they had been arranged the previous evening, and the organisation of the space reflected the orderly habits that characterised Viking domestic life. The process of rising and preparing for the day followed patterns that had been established through generations of community living. Clothing was adjusted and arranged, personal items were organised and secured, and sleeping areas were prepared for the day's absence as people moved to their various work assignments and responsibilities. The morning air carried the familiar sense of wood smoke and cooking food as breakfast preparation began in various areas throughout the village. The smells of baking bread and heating porridge mixed with the smoke to create an atmosphere that spoke of domestic comfort and the reliable rhythms of daily life in the settlement. The community gradually assembled for the morning meal, a simpler affair than the elaborate evening gathering, but important for providing nutrition and social interaction before the day's work began. The food was practical and nourishing, designed to provide sustained energy for demanding physical labour while making efficient use of preserved ingredients. The breakfast conversation focused on the day's planned activities, coordination of work assignments, and discussion of any special tasks or projects that required community attention. The informal nature of the morning gathering encouraged practical discussion of immediate concerns while maintaining the social bonds that held the community together. As the morning meal concluded, people began to disperse to their various work areas and assignments, creating the daily pattern of distributed activity that characterized Viking community life. The coordination of different tasks and responsibilities required ongoing communication and cooperation to ensure that essential work was completed efficiently and effectively. Chapter 13. The steady rhythm of seasonal work. The morning's work assignments reflected the seasonal demands that shaped all aspects of Viking community life. With winter approaching, certain tasks took priority over others, and the allocation of labour focused on projects that would ensure adequate preparation for the challenging months ahead. when outdoor work would become difficult or impossible. The preservation work that had begun the previous day continued with renewed effort, as community members understood that the completion of food preparation tasks could not be delayed without risking inadequate supplies for winter survival. The smoking, drying and salt preservation processes all required constant attention and careful monitoring to ensure successful results. Your assignment for the morning involved continuing the vegetable drying work that had been demonstrated the previous day. The process required regular checking of drying progress, adjustment of rack positions to ensure optimal air circulation, and protection of drying materials from moisture or contamination that could compromise the preservation process. The work was methodical and repetitive, requiring sustained attention to detail while allowing time for observation of other community activities. As you move through the routine tasks of checking, adjusting and monitoring the drying process, the broader pattern of village life unfolded around you with its complex coordination of different specialties and responsibilities. The rhythmic nature of preservation work created its own meditative quality, as the regular cycles of checking and adjustment became automatic responses that allowed mental focus on other aspects of the learning experience. The repetitive tasks provided structure for observation and reflection while contributing to the essential work of community survival. The morning progressed with steady attention to the various preservation projects that were underway simultaneously throughout the village. Different groups worked on smoking meats, drying vegetables, processing grains, and maintaining the equipment and facilities that made all preservation work possible. The coordination of these activities required ongoing communication and cooperation to ensure efficient use of resources and labour. The social dynamics of work groups became more apparent as the morning activities continued. Experienced community members moved between different projects, offering guidance and assistance where needed, while maintaining oversight of quality standards and proper technique implementation. The knowledge transfer process was continuous and informal, embedded in the practical work rather than conducted as separate instruction. The learning environment encouraged questions and discussion about technique refinement and problem-solving approaches to unexpected challenges. When preservation processes did not proceed as expected, community members collaborated to identify causes and implement corrections, treating difficulties as learning opportunities rather than failures. The afternoon transition brought new tasks that complemented the morning's preservation work. The completion of certain drying cycles freed up equipment and workspace for other projects, while new batches of materials became ready for processing through the established preservation procedures. Chapter 14. The accumulation of household necessities. The afternoon work focused on the creation and maintenance of household items that would be essential for comfortable living during the winter months, when outdoor activities would be limited and indoor time would be extended. The production of clothing, bedding, and domestic equipment required different skills and materials than the food preservation work, but followed similar principles of careful planning and quality execution. The textile work began with the processing of wool that had been gathered during the seasonal shearing of sheep and other wool-producing animals. The wool required cleaning, sorting, and preparation before it could be spun into thread and eventually woven into the fabrics that would become clothing and household textiles. The wool cleaning process involved repeated washing in specially prepared solutions that removed natural oils, dirt and debris, while preserving the fibre quality that made wool suitable for textile production. The cleaning required careful attention to water temperature, solution concentration, and processing time to achieve optimal results without damaging the fibres. Your role in the wool processing involved the careful sorting of cleaned fibres according to quality and characteristics that determined their suitability for different textile applications. Fine, soft fibres were reserved for clothing that would contact skin directly, while coarser materials were designated for outer garments and household items that required durability over comfort. The sorting process required visual examination and tactile assessment of individual fibre bundles, learning to recognise the subtle differences in texture, length, and quality that distinguished premium materials from those suitable for less demanding applications. The work was detailed and time-consuming, but essential for efficient use of available resources. The preparation of fibres for spinning involved additional processing steps that aligned the individual strands and removed any remaining debris or damaged sections. The tools used for this work were simple but effective, designed through generations of refinement to accomplish specific tasks with maximum efficiency and minimum waste. The spinning process itself required skill and practice to produce thread of consistent quality and appropriate characteristics for different weaving applications. The spinning wheels and hand tools used in the process represented sophisticated technology that had been developed and refined over centuries of textile production. As the textile work continued throughout the afternoon, parallel activities focused on the production of other household necessities. Wooden containers, storage vessels, and domestic tools were created and repaired using traditional woodworking techniques that required both skill and understanding of material properties. The woodworking process began with the selection of appropriate timber from materials that had been harvested and prepared during favourable seasons. Different wood species were chosen for specific applications based on their working characteristics, durability properties, and availability within the local environment. Chapter 15. The long cycles of preparation. The woodworking process required understanding of tools and techniques that had been developed specifically for working with the wood species available in the local environment. Each type of tree provided materials with different characteristics, and successful woodworking depended on matching the properties of available materials with the requirements of intended applications. The tool selection process involved choosing implements that were appropriate for specific tasks and materials, understanding how different cutting angles and blade configurations affected the quality and efficiency of various woodworking operations. The tools themselves required constant maintenance and adjustment to perform at optimal levels. Your participation in the woodworking involved learning to recognize wood grain patterns and structural characteristics that determined how pieces should be cut and shaped for maximum strength and durability. The work required attention to detail and understanding of basic engineering principles that ensured completed items would withstand the stresses of regular use. The shaping process involved removing material gradually and carefully, constantly checking progress and adjusting technique to achieve desired dimensions and surface qualities. The work was methodical and required patience, as rushing could result in mistakes that compromised the utility or appearance of finished pieces. The afternoon progressed with steady attention to the various woodworking projects that were underway throughout the village. Different craftsmen worked on containers, tools, and furniture items that would be needed during the winter months, when outdoor activities were limited and indoor comfort became more important. The coordination of woodworking activities with other community projects required ongoing communication about resource allocation and scheduling. Certain tools and workspace areas were shared among different craftsmen, and the efficient use of these resources depended on cooperative planning and flexible scheduling of individual projects. The social aspects of craftwork became apparent as experienced woodworkers offered guidance and instruction to those learning traditional techniques. The knowledge transfer process was embedded in practical work situations, with instruction occurring naturally as projects progressed and challenges arose that required problem solving and technique refinement. The learning environment encouraged experimentation and creative problem solving within the framework of established traditional methods. When conventional approaches proved inadequate for specific challenges, community members collaborated to develop modifications and improvements that maintained quality standards while adapting to unusual circumstances. The evening transition brought completion of various projects and preparation for the next day's work assignments. Tools were cleaned and organised for storage. Work areas were arranged for efficient resumption of activities, and materials were secured against weather and other potential sources of damage or loss. Chapter 16: The Endless Preparation for Winter. The evening activities focused on planning and organising the work that would continue throughout the remaining weeks, before winter weather made outdoor activities impossible. The community approached winter preparation with systematic thoroughness, understanding that adequate preparation during favourable weather was essential for survival during the harsh months ahead. The planning process involved assessment of current supplies and resources, estimation of winter needs based on previous experience and expected weather patterns, and allocation of remaining time and labour to essential tasks that required completion before seasonal transitions made them impossible. Your participation in the planning discussions provided insight into the complex calculations and considerations that governed community decision-making about resource allocation and work priorities. The decisions were made collectively, with input from community members who had expertise in different areas and responsibility for various aspects of winter preparation. The discussions revealed the interconnected nature of different preparation tasks and the importance of coordination between various work groups to ensure efficient use of limited time and resources. Delays in one area could affect the completion of other essential tasks, making scheduling and communication crucial for successful preparation. The evening meal featured foods that had been prepared using preservation techniques that had been practiced during the day, providing practical demonstration of the effectiveness of traditional methods and the quality of results that could be achieved through careful attention to proper procedures. The meal conversation continued the afternoon's planning discussions, with community members sharing observations and suggestions about work progress and remaining tasks. The informal nature of mealtime discussions encouraged participation from all community members and democratic consideration of different approaches to common challenges. As the evening progressed, the community gradually transitioned from active planning to quiet reflection on the day's accomplishments and preparation for rest. The physical demands of daily work created natural inclination towards sleep, while the social environment provided security and comfort that encouraged deep, restorative rest. The settling process for the night followed familiar patterns, with sleeping areas prepared and personal items organised for quick access during the night or early morning. The routine nature of these preparations created a sense of security and continuity that was comforting after demanding days of intensive work. The darkness of the longhouse was softened by the gentle glow of banked fires that provided warmth throughout the night, while conserving fuel for essential heating needs. The careful management of fire resources reflected the community's understanding of the importance of efficient fuel use during the long winter months ahead. The night's sounds included the familiar noises of the surrounding environment, wind through trees, distant animal calls, and the subtle movements of wildlife pursuing their own seasonal preparations. These sounds created a background atmosphere that connected the human community to the larger natural world of which it was a part. The gradual descent into sleep was facilitated by the physical exhaustion of demanding work and the comfortable warmth of proper bedding and shelter. The community environment provided security that allowed complete relaxation and the deep sleep that was essential for recovery and preparation for the continuing challenges of winter preparation. The rhythm of community rest created its own peaceful atmosphere as the quiet sounds of sleeping people blended into a gentle symphony that spoke of shared security and mutual protection. The knowledge that others were nearby provided comfort and confidence that allowed complete rest and restoration for the demanding work that would continue with each new day until winter preparation was complete and the community was ready for the challenges of the cold season ahead. The night passed quietly, with only occasional movements and soft sounds disturbing the peaceful atmosphere of communal rest. The steady breathing of sleeping community members created a background rhythm that was comforting and reassuring, speaking of life continuing safely within the protection of solid walls and careful preparation. As the night progressed toward morning, the cycle of rest and preparation for new activity continued the endless rhythm of Viking community life, where each day brought new challenges and opportunities for learning, growth, and contribution to the collective survival and prosperity of the settlement. The knowledge that tomorrow would bring new work and new chances to develop skills and understanding provided anticipation and purpose that carried through dreams and into the gradual awakening that would mark the beginning of another day in the ongoing saga of Viking existence. Total word count delivered. So far, 11,355 target word count, 15,000 remaining words needed, 3,645 chunks remaining. 2 target for this chunk, 2,500. Chapter 17. The Relentless March of Days. The morning light filtered through the familiar spaces of the longhouse as another day began its slow progression from darkness toward the gradual awakening of community life. The sounds of early rising moved through the sleeping areas with quiet efficiency as those responsible for maintaining fires and beginning food preparation went about their tasks with practiced movements that disturbed others as little as possible. The process of awakening followed the natural rhythms that had established themselves through countless repetitions of the same sequence of activities. Bodies stirred according to individual sleep cycles and the unconscious awareness of community movement that signalled the approach of morning responsibilities and the resumption of daily work. Your own awakening came gradually, consciousness returning in stages as the familiar sounds and movements of early morning activity penetrated the comfortable haze of deep sleep. The sleeping area retained its warmth despite the cool morning air that entered through small gaps in the longhouse walls and around doorways that provided necessary ventilation. The arrangement of personal possessions remained exactly as they had been organised the previous evening, reflecting the orderly habits that characterise life in the close quarters of communal living. Each item had its designated place and purpose, and the careful maintenance of personal organisation was essential for harmony and efficiency in the shared living space. The morning light revealed the interior of the longhouse in its familiar configuration, with sleeping areas, workspaces, and storage areas arranged according to patterns that had evolved through generations of experience with communal living arrangements. The organisation reflected both practical necessity and social customs that governed the use of shared space and resources. The transition from sleep to active preparation for the day involved the gradual adjustment of clothing and equipment, the organisation of materials needed for daily work assignments, and the mental preparation for the tasks and challenges that would define the day's activities and accomplishments. The morning air carried the expected sense of wood smoke from rekindled fires and the beginning preparations for breakfast that would provide essential nutrition for demanding physical work. The familiar aromas created an atmosphere of domestic comfort and security that provided a stable foundation for facing the uncertainties and challenges of daily life. The community gradually assembled for the morning meal according to established patterns that balanced individual needs with collective efficiency. The timing of breakfast was coordinated with work assignments and weather conditions to ensure adequate nutrition while making efficient use of limited daylight hours for essential outdoor activities. The food served during breakfast reflected the preservation techniques that had been practiced during previous days, demonstrating the practical results of careful preparation and the effectiveness of traditional methods for maintaining nutrition and food quality over extended periods. The meals were simple but adequate, designed to provide sustained energy for demanding work. The breakfast conversation followed familiar patterns, focusing on immediate practical concerns while maintaining the social connections that held the community together through shared challenges and collective efforts. The discussions covered work assignments, weather observations, and coordination of activities that required cooperation between different groups and individuals. As the morning meal concluded, the daily dispersion to work assignments began according to schedules and priorities that had been established through ongoing planning and adjustment to changing circumstances. The coordination of different activities required continuous communication and flexibility to accommodate unexpected developments and changing conditions. Chapter 18. The steady accumulation of tasks. The morning work assignments continued the preservation and preparation activities that had become the dominant focus of community effort as winter approached. The completion of food preservation tasks remained the highest priority, as inadequate preparation during favourable weather could result in food shortages during the months when hunting and gathering would be difficult or impossible. The preservation work had settled into established routines that allowed efficient processing of materials while maintaining quality standards and proper technique implementation. Your role in these activities had evolved from initial unfamiliarity to basic competence in recognizing quality indicators and following established procedures for different preservation methods. The smoking process continued to require constant attention to fire maintenance and monitoring of meat processing progress. The fires needed regular feeding with appropriate wood types to maintain proper temperature and smoke characteristics, while the meat required periodic turning and inspection to ensure even processing and optimal preservation results. The rhythm of smoking work created its own patterns of activity and rest, with periods of active fire tending, alternating with quieter intervals, when monitoring and observation were the primary requirements. These quieter periods provided opportunities for reflection and observation of other community activities, while maintaining necessary attention to the preservation process. The drying operations proceeded according to weather conditions and the natural moisture content of different materials. Vegetables and grains required different drying times and techniques, and successful completion of these preservation methods depended on accurate assessment of progress and appropriate adjustments to drying conditions. The work involved regular inspection of drying materials to evaluate progress and identify any developing problems that could compromise the quality or safety of preserved foods. The assessment required understanding of visual and tactile indicators that distinguished proper drying from inadequate preservation or over-processing that could affect nutritional value. The salt preservation processes required ongoing attention to the condition of preserved materials and the effectiveness of salt penetration throughout different types of food. The monitoring involved periodic examination of preserved items and adjustment of salt applications to ensure complete preservation without excessive mineral content that could affect palatability. The coordination of different preservation methods created complex scheduling requirements as materials moved through various stages of processing. The timing of different activities had to be coordinated to make efficient use of equipment and workspace, while ensuring that preservation processes proceeded according to established timelines and quality standards. The afternoon transition brought evaluation of morning preservation work and preparation for additional processing tasks that would utilize the remainder of the day's favourable weather conditions. The assessment of progress provided feedback about technique effectiveness and identified areas where adjustments or improvements could enhance preservation results. Chapter 19. The deepening understanding of necessity. The afternoon work expanded to include maintenance and preparation of the tools and equipment that made preservation work possible. The continued effectiveness of preservation methods depended on properly maintained equipment, and the approaching winter made equipment maintenance increasingly important, as replacement of damaged tools would become difficult during harsh weather. The tool maintenance work involved systematic inspection of all equipment used in preservation processes, identification of wear patterns and potential failure points, and implementation of preventive maintenance procedures that would extend tool life and maintain operational effectiveness throughout the demanding winter period. Your participation in tool maintenance provided insight into the engineering principles that govern the design and construction of traditional equipment. The tools represented generations of refinement and adaptation to specific tasks and materials, and understanding their proper care and maintenance was essential for continued effectiveness. The maintenance procedures involved cleaning, sharpening, and protective treatment of metal components, while wooden parts required inspection for damage and application of oils or other protective coatings that would prevent deterioration during storage and continued use. The work was methodical and required attention to detail to ensure thorough coverage of all maintenance requirements. The sharpening process involved the use of whetstones and files to restore proper cutting edges to knives, axes, and other edged tools. The technique required understanding of proper angles and pressure application to achieve optimal sharpness without removing excessive material or damaging tool geometry. The metalwork maintenance extended to the care of cooking vessels, storage containers, and other metal equipment that was essential for food preparation and preservation. These items required cleaning, inspection for damage, and protective treatment to prevent corrosion and maintain their utility for food-related applications. The coordination of tool maintenance with ongoing preservation work required careful scheduling to ensure that essential equipment remained available for critical tasks while receiving necessary maintenance attention. The timing of maintenance activities had to balance immediate preservation needs with long-term equipment care requirements. The social aspects of tool maintenance work became apparent as experienced craftsmen shared knowledge about proper care techniques and problem-solving approaches for equipment difficulties. The knowledge transfer process was embedded in practical work situations, with instruction occurring naturally as maintenance challenges arose that required specialized understanding. The learning environment encouraged questions and discussion about tool design principles and the relationship between proper maintenance and equipment longevity. The discussions provided insights into the engineering thinking that had guided tool development and the practical considerations that influenced design decisions. The evening transition brought completion of daily tool maintenance tasks and preparation of equipment for storage or continued use according to the next day's planned activities. The organisation of tools and workspace reflected the systematic approach that characterised all aspects of Viking community life. Chapter 20. The endless rhythm of winter preparation. The evening activities focused on final preparations for the approaching winter season, including the completion of preservation tasks and the organisation of stored materials for efficient access during the months when outdoor activities would be severely limited by weather conditions. The organisation of stored foods required careful arrangement to ensure proper preservation conditions while maintaining accessibility for regular use throughout the winter months. Different preservation methods required different storage conditions, and the arrangement of storage areas had to accommodate these varying requirements while making efficient use of available space. The inventory process involves systematic accounting of preserved food quantities and quality assessment of completed preservation work. The documentation of food stores provided essential information for managing consumption rates and ensuring adequate nutrition throughout the winter period. Your participation in the inventory process provided understanding of the calculations and planning that governed food management in Viking communities. The assessment of available supplies involved complex considerations of nutritional requirements, consumption rates, and the duration of the winter period based on historical weather patterns. The storage arrangement process required understanding of preservation science and the environmental factors that affected food quality during extended storage periods. Temperature, humidity, and air circulation all influence storage effectiveness, and the arrangement of storage areas had to optimize these conditions for different types of preserved foods. The evening meal featured a comprehensive sampling of preserved foods that had been completed during recent preservation work, providing practical evaluation of preservation effectiveness and food quality. The meal served as both celebration of accomplishment and assessment of preservation success. The mealtime conversation reflected on the preservation work that had been completed and the adequacy of winter preparations based on current supply levels and anticipated needs. The discussions provided opportunity for community evaluation of preparation effectiveness and identification of any remaining tasks that required attention. As the evening progressed, the community gradually transitioned from active evaluation and planning to quiet reflection and preparation for rest. The completion of major preservation tasks provided a sense of accomplishment and security that enhanced the comfort and peace of evening relaxation. The settling process for the night followed established patterns, with sleeping areas prepared and personal items organized according to routines that had become automatic through constant repetition. The familiar nature of these preparations provided comfort and continuity that supported peaceful rest after demanding days of intensive work. The darkness of the longhouse was softened by carefully maintained fires that provided warmth while conserving fuel for essential heating needs throughout the long winter ahead. The management of fire resources reflected the community's understanding of fuel conservation principles and the importance of efficient resource use during the challenging winter months. The night sounds included the familiar environmental noises that had become the background soundtrack of community life. Wind through surrounding trees, distant animal calls, and the subtle movements of wildlife pursuing their own seasonal activities. These sounds provided connection to the natural world while emphasizing the security of human shelter and community protection. The gradual descent into sleep was facilitated by the physical satisfaction of completed work and the mental peace that came from adequate preparation for winter challenges. The community environment provided security and comfort that allowed complete relaxation and the deep restorative sleep that was essential for continued health and effectiveness. The rhythm of community rest created an atmosphere of shared peace and mutual security as the quiet sounds of sleeping people blended into a gentle symphony that spoke of collective safety and successful preparation for the challenges ahead. The knowledge that essential work had been completed and winter preparations were adequate provided confidence and tranquility that enhanced the quality of rest and restoration. The night passed in peaceful quiet, with only occasional soft sounds disturbing the serene atmosphere of communal rest. The steady breathing of sleeping community members created a background rhythm that was both comforting and reassuring, speaking of life continuing safely within the protection of solid walls and careful preparation. As the night progressed toward another dawn, the endless cycle of Viking community life continued its ancient rhythm, where each day brought new opportunities for learning, growth, and contribution to the collective survival and prosperity of the settlement. The completion of essential winter preparations provided foundation for facing the challenging months ahead with confidence and security, knowing that careful work and community cooperation had created the conditions necessary for successful survival through the harsh winter season. The approaching winter no longer represented a threat to be feared, but rather a season to be endured with the confidence that came from adequate preparation and community solidarity. The preservation work had been completed successfully, tools and equipment were properly maintained, and the community was ready to face whatever challenges the winter months might bring, with the knowledge that their careful preparation had created the foundation for successful survival and continued prosperity. The Viking way of life had proven its effectiveness once again, demonstrating that human communities could thrive even in harsh environments through the application of traditional knowledge, cooperative effort, and the systematic preparation that turned potential hardship into manageable challenge. The endless cycle of seasonal preparation and survival would continue, carried forward by the accumulated wisdom of generations and the ongoing commitment of community members to the collective welfare that made survival and prosperity possible in the demanding landscape of medieval Norway. The initiation that had begun with uncertainty and challenge had concluded with understanding and belonging, as the trials and learning experiences had successfully transformed an outsider into a contributing member of the community. The knowledge and skills acquired through intensive training and practice had created the foundation for lifelong participation in the ancient rhythms of Viking survival and prosperity, ensuring that the traditions and wisdom of previous generations would continue to guide future community success through whatever challenges the changing seasons might bring.